grape pruning and training, there were several things we need to think through. So really, it's ideal to choose a training system before you plant. And criteria for choosing that system is the type of vine planted, what space you have available, and also the expertise of the grower. There are lots and lots of options out there. And a lot of it also depends on the type of grape you choose, because grapes grow in different ways, and that also leads into how we train them and prune them. So first off, we need some grape terminology. So we do have a trunk. So just like you would think of with a tree, we have a trunk. Sometimes we can have a single trunk. Sometimes we can have double trunks. And then off of that trunk on a wire typically comes off what we call a cordon. And off of that cordon comes spurs, and those spurs have a certain number of buds on them. And those buds grow out into leaves and your flower clusters that become grapes. So knowing that also helps terminology with pruning and training. Trellises. So as mentioned, there are lots of different types of trellises. Something very, very important with any kind of trellis you choose is to have anchoring. And because when there are grapes on, and grapevines are very vigorous, so it holds a lot of weight. So we have to think about those braces at the end. There are lots of plans available and different information and schematics out there, but making sure you have that bracing appropriate, the heavy enough wire, big enough post, all make a huge difference in how successful that trellis system is. So one of the most common training systems is a single curtain cordon system. So when we plant them, we remove all but 2 buds. So down here, we can look and see that perhaps those little sticks are those 2 buds. And that first growing season, we select 1 cane, and we'll remove all the others, and we'll train this on a wire to go up to that top wire on our trellis system. So that is going to become our trunk. In the second growing season, we select 2 cordons to tie to the top wire. So we actually are training them to do this. We're tying them. They're not going to stay on that wire by themselves. So we do have to tie them to the wire to form those cordon arms out. In the third growing season, we leave 1 fruit cluster per shoot. We position those shoots to grow downward, forming a curtain from that top wire. So ideally, they are going down like you see in this picture. And later on, when we prune, those become those spurs that I showed in the first picture. So that third dormant season, in the dormant, so this time of year, we prune those spurs. Typically, plants are spaced 10 to 12 feet apart, and then 4 or less buds per each of those spurs. A lot of times those spurs are at least a hand width apart, so 6 to 8 inches apart, and you can kind of see that in this graph where their spurs are hanging down, and you can see those buds on them. And then grapes grow extremely fast. There is lots and lots of pruning to be done in the winter time to remove all of that growth and prepare for that next growing season. There are lots of different methods. Cordon, this one is showing from the top wire down. Some like to grow up. So the cordon may be at knee height and the shoots grow up, and you have what we call catch wires. So 2 wires that you will put shoots in between those 2 wires. There's an umbrella system, there's fan systems, there's lots and lots more out there. As mentioned, a lot of it depends on the grape themselves, and some of these are easier to prune than others. Also in a home garden situation, arbors or overhead structures can also be fun. So grapes like to go on arbors and provide that shade, and you can also still prune them and get grapes. Pruning becomes a little more difficult when you're thinking about using a ladder to go up as opposed to on a traditional trellis system. And also mentioned was talking about transplanting grapes or grape propagation. I don't really have much experience of actually trying to transplant a grape plant. I would say some of it's going to matter as far as size and how much equipment you have, how much digging you want to do, that type of thing. But grapes are readily propagated from dormant cuttings. So they are taken during the dormant season. Typically, they're 1-year-old growth, slightly bigger than a pencil, and we want long, straight shoots. Big thing is to know which side is right side up. They do not work if you plant them upside down. So knowing the direction of those buds, although sometimes the way the vines grow, that can be a little bit challenging. So one thing to do is to cut the bottom straight and the top at an angle. So that way you know which side is right side up. Typically, those cuttings are 12 to 18 inches long. We want at least 4 buds. 3 of those buds go underground and rooting hormone on the base and then stuck in the soil as soon as they are cut. And then one caveat I will also make is know your source, because we have a lot of grapes that have virus problems. And those viruses can be spread through propagation. So knowing that source and making sure you have a good, clean source before you start from cuttings is important.